Well, the Bible is a great many things. And one of the things that the Bible is a book filled with miraculous, supernatural things. It doesn't matter exactly how you read this. Like, you could read this allegorically and mythologically. You could read this totally literally. And it really, it doesn't matter how you interpret it or how you read it. It's just undeniable that the Bible is filled with miracles. You can kind of go to any place. You can go to Jesus' ministry where, it talks, it begins with a virgin birth, and then he's walking on water, and then he's feeding 5,000 people with a box lunch, and he's calming a storm, and then he's being raised from the dead and all this stuff. And that's, undeniably supernatural. And then, you can go later on in the New Testament, and you can see, kids that are prophets, little kids, preaching, by inspiration. And you can see the apostles performing miracles. And they're really just kind of echoing what you see in the Old Testament. I mean, like the first sentence of the Bible-ish, essentially, is, that God speaks the universe into existence. Then it keeps going, and you've got, the Exodus and the crossing of the Red Sea, and you've got Daniel in the lion's den, and you've got, just all sorts from Jonah, the whale, and you can, I'm sure, think of your own. So the Bible's full of miracles, is what I'm trying to get at. But I'm not totally sure that of everything we read in the Bible, all the miracles that we can kind of sort of witness through their stories, that there is any miracle more powerful or more miraculous than a story in the book of Acts in which two groups of people who have different backgrounds can't get along, and then they work out their differences, and they live at peace. Here's what happened. You see, in the early church, we don't often think about this much, but the early church, Christianity was not just a thing you went to like once a week. It was not, an organization you join or something, okay, I have faith, and now I'm going to go to that church on Sundays and maybe on Wednesdays and, participate in that. The early church was really a community. It was very communal living. People got together, and every single day they lived together, and they ate together, and they grew together, and that's sort of the way it was. It was very, very much like the hippies. They were very hippie-ish. And you know what? The reasons for that are pretty simple, okay? One reason for that you see is, well, it was a continuation of what the disciples did. The 12 disciples that became the apostles, they left their homes. They left their jobs, they left their families, they followed Jesus. And so they didn't just go and follow Jesus, a little bit or somewhat. For years, for 3 years, they went, and everywhere Jesus went, they went. So for the people who believe in Jesus to spend every day together, kind of every waking moment together as one big family, that was just par for the course. That was just the way it had been from the beginning. So on the one hand, there was that. But on the other hand, there was sort of some necessity here. You see, what we should probably understand is that in ancient Judaism, it was all sort of communal. It was all very community, family based. People took care of each other. And right from the start, right from day one, day of Pentecost, right from the start, or at least day 2, second sermon, whatever, during that, you see the Jewish leaders persecuting the church, pushing back against the church. And so the community leaders, the religious leaders, made it clear Christianity is bad news. You shouldn't join it. So if you joined this Christian movement, you were putting yourself squarely in the crosshairs against the community leaders. The religious leaders, the government leaders, you were putting yourself at odds with them. And so the Jewish people did what they would do to try to keep people in line. They threatened with a loss of a safety net. Hey, we've always taken care of you. You've been part of our family. You've been part of our community. And now, if you're going to be baptized into Christ, if you're going to join this new community, then our community is out and we're done. And so what was happening is, you would become a Christian, and then your family would abandon you, and you've got nowhere else to go. And for some people, not really all that big of a deal. I mean, if you have a job, if you can take care of yourself, all of that, fine. If you're young and you're healthy and all of that, no worries. But like for the sick, or for the very young, like children, or for, mothers without their husbands, or specifically widows, this was a real problem. Because this was a world in which those people were already vulnerable, and the safety nets around them, the support systems around them that helped them live, disappeared once they became Christians. So the church just said, cool, no worries. We will become your safety net. We'll become the ones who take care of you. So the early church, we need to understand, was not like a building you went to. It wasn't even like a community you go to. The early church was a place in which everybody lived communally. Everybody took care of each other, and specifically for the most vulnerable among them, there was not a question about what happens, to these people who need help, because they were always being helped at all times. So that leads us to a meeting between the apostles and the Hellenistic Jews one day. Now, the Hellenistic Jews, not a group we talk about all that often, because to us, they're all sort of the same. To us, they're all just Jews. That's just all it was. But for them, it was a much different conversation. You see, the Jewish people, they spoke Aramaic. They would have read Hebrew. They had all these things. They also, knew Greek because that was the common tongue of the day. But for the most part, they would pray, they would worship in either Hebrew or Aramaic. They would speak to each other in normal conversation in Aramaic because that's who they were. That was who they were as the Hebrew people. Well, the Hellenistic Jews were not Hebrews, or at least not fully Hebrews. Hundreds of years before, Alexander the Great does his thing. The Greeks come in and take over. That's a whole thing. And so these are Greek converts to Judaism called Hellenists. Now, understand, they are no less Jews than the people that we think of when we think about Jews, who were, sort of the Middle Eastern Jews. No less devout, no less committed to the law of Moses, no less anything at all. It's just the biggest difference, honestly, is they spoke Greek and not Aramaic or Hebrew. And so what they did was somebody along the way actually went so far as to translate the Bible from Hebrew into Greek. So that way they could read it. That's called the Septuagint, as it turns out. And so they have their own Bible. Because they have their own Bible, because they have their own, they also had their own temple. They had their own synagogue and place of worship. They would go, and that's where they would go. So if you spoke one language, you went to one group of synagogues. If you spoke another language, you went to another one. Now, here's why this all becomes important. The apostles, to what we know, none of them are Hellenists. They're all just, regular, run-of-the-mill Jewish people who spoke Aramaic and all that. And so what happened was, as these two groups that normally would stay separate when it comes to worship, normally you would not see them together praying or, giving offerings or whatever. Well, now under Christianity, everybody was kind of dumped into the same pot, so to speak. Everybody was kind of brought into the same group. And the same issues that plagued the Jewish people who spoke Aramaic and read Hebrew also plagued the Hellenists. Same culture. So when the Hellenists who spoke Greek, when they were baptized, they lost their safety net as well, just like anybody else would have. All that is background to this conversation between the Hellenists and the apostles. You see that the Hellenists come to the apostles one day and say, we've got a problem. Okay? You guys are feeding our widows. Every day, the widows are being fed. And we appreciate that, and that's great. But the Hellenists said, our widows are being treated differently than the other widows are. The Aramaic speaking, the Hebrew readers, the regular Middle Eastern Jewish widows, they're being treated better than the Hellenist widows are. It's like we're second-class citizens. And we want that to be fixed. Now, a couple things to note here with this conversation. Number one, we don't know if that's true. They said, hey, we're being discriminated against. They said it's because of bigotry. We know that. We have not a clue if what they said was even true or not. Maybe it was all in their heads. Maybe it was a language barrier. Maybe there was something cultural where, it was just something between the two groups and they didn't understand. Listen, no offense, but you get women of a certain age, they're sort of cranky. Maybe the Hellenistic widows were just real cranky. I don't know. We don't know. We also We have no idea even if it were true what it was. Like, are you giving them less food? Is it a matter of giving them the food that nobody else wants? Is it a timely thing, like you feed everybody else first and then they come up last? Like, we're not really privy to what the issue is. What we know is that the Hellenistic widows felt like they were being discriminated against by the apostles, by the church. They didn't appreciate it. They wanted it fixed. And we know this was a massively important problem because it was not just about the widows at this point. It was also about the entire Hellenistic community. Because let me tell you, if I treat your mom bad, I don't care how close we are. If I treat your grandma bad, I don't care what sort of history we have. If these Hellenistic widows are being treated poorly, the entire Hellenistic community would take that personally. They would see their entire minority group within the church, and they were very much the minority. They would have seen that as them being second-class citizens, the whole group. Not just the widows, but everyone. And the apostles then have a choice to make as to what they're going to do. And quite frankly, what the apostles do is absolutely beautiful. So too, actually, before we get to that, is what they did not do. Now, you're people, I'm a person, we very often are told, hey, you're doing something wrong. And there's certain reactions we sometimes have to that. You know, like one thing is we try to justify ourselves. First thing we do when somebody tells us, hey, you did something wrong, you try to justify yourself. Well, I didn't really mean to, I didn't really do it, you know, whatever, and you try to make it seem like it's not a big deal. And then another thing we like to do is we just like to deny it. Nope, didn't happen, sorry. Didn't happen. Don't care how you feel, didn't happen. You don't have any evidence. I mean, we don't have any evidence either, but you don't have any evidence. Nope, didn't happen. Sometimes we like to blame them. Like I just said, maybe it was the Hellenist's fault. I did that literally in this sermon 2 minutes ago. If they didn't. Sometimes we say, well, it's actually your fault. You're the one bringing this on yourself. Or we minimize it. We minimize it and we say, oh man, okay, so we did it. We've done this bad thing, but it's not a big deal. Why are you worried about it? Quit being a baby. These are the things we all do. I do it. You've done it. Everyone does it. This is what we do when we're accused of something. And what's fascinating is that the apostles didn't do any of it. None of it. Not a single thing. We don't read a single word of them pushing back at all. The apostles listened. They heard that there were people within their community who felt like they were being discriminated against. And they said, what can we do to fix this? And they came up with a really interesting solution. They said, now, first of all, this is a problem that I'm not sure we can handle ourselves. You know, as apostles, we've got things we're trying to do. You know, we've got sort of bigger plans here for the church. We're doing stuff on a constant basis. We really this is not something that we can, we can't give this the time it deserves. So they delegated the problem. They brought the entire church together, the whole community, Hellenists and non-Hellenists, brought everybody together and said, listen, here's what we're going to do. We want to make sure everybody feels equally a part of everything. We want to make sure the widows are treated well, no matter what language they speak. We want to make sure everybody knows where they stand. So they appointed 7 people. Okay? 7 people who we're told were filled with the Holy Spirit and were respected by everybody. And they said these 7 people will make sure this feeding program for all the widows will go smoothly and equally and lovingly. And there was one more wrinkle to it that is just awesome. All 7 people, all 7, were Hellenists. All of them. Which does a couple of things. First of all, it empowers them to help themselves. It empowers them to feel like they are part. They have now a leadership stake in this community. So now they feel like they're part of things. It also makes sure that the widows are seeing friendly faces, people speaking their language. Literally speaking their language as they're being fed. So it takes care of that problem. It takes care of these problems. And you know what? You know how it hurt the other Jewish people? It didn't at all. They were totally happy with it in the first place. No one was unhappy. Everybody won. And the amazing epilogue of the story is this. It's like 7 verses in the Bible, this story, and then it's over. There is no further arguing, complaining, problems. The epilogue is they lived happily ever after. It worked. There was a problem between two different groups of people. They came to a resolution. They lived at peace, and that was that. Now, I hope you think that's a cool story. Otherwise, I just wasted my time telling you. If nothing else. But you might also be asking, well, how is that miraculous? Like you said something about like the raising of the dead and like Daniel in the lion's den, and like those are like miracles. You know, people feeding widows and not fighting is not really a miracle. You might be asking that. And if you are asking that, I have to ask you a question. Have you ever met people? Like really? Have you ever tried to take people who are very different, speaking different languages literally, and try to make peace between them? Have you ever tried to find a group of people who say, I'm being discriminated against, you are a bigot, and then make peace between those people that lasts? I mean, that doesn't happen. The reason it doesn't happen in our world is because we, as people, are tribalistic. We are very tribal people. It might sound insulting, you know, because it seems a little barbaric and backwards, but it's the truth. We are very tribal people. Here's what people like to do. And when I say people, I mean you, I mean me, I mean everybody. This is what we like to do. We like to find the people who look like us and sound like us and think like us and talk like us and believe like us. We like to find those people and we like to identify them. And then we like to bring those people close. And then we like to take a wall and build it around us. And then we like to hang out inside that wall with people who are just like us, and that's what we do. I mean, we can call those countries if we like. We can call them religions if we like. We can call them, you know, cultures if we like. But it's all the same situation. It's tribalistic. We find the people that are like us, and we hunker down with them, and that's what we do. And if you're on the inside, you get treated a certain way. You get viewed as a certain way. You're given a benefit of the doubt a certain way. You're trusted a certain way. If you're inside, there's one standard for you to live in. And if you're outside of that wall, well, now you're treated entirely differently. The standard changes. Because you don't think like us. You don't look like us. You don't believe like us. You don't act like us. You're not us. And so we might treat us in a certain way. We treat not us in a different way. And the care and compassion and love and generosity that every human being is incredibly capable of. I've never met a person who is not capable of the most beautiful of kindness. That kindness we give to ours. We say, well, these people don't deserve it. I mean, we don't say it out loud, but that's how we live. And it's funny, you know, I mentioned kind of big things, you know, like a country or a religion or a culture or a race, you know, skin color, like, okay, great, we do that. But it's funny, people are funny like this because we don't just have the one wall. Okay, we have like inner walls then. Like it's not just enough to be a country, you know, now, especially now it's about the political party. Right? Like I'll treat my political party very different than the other political party. Like we're all Americans, who cares? I'm going to treat the people who vote like me very different. We do this in the church too. Oh, it's terrible. I'll treat the people in our denomination, the people who interpret the Bible close enough to us, very different than the Christians who are every bit as faithful, believe functionally most of the same things, but they interpret things a little, I'm going to treat them a little bit different. You see this within racial communities as well. You know, you're only sort of one of us. I mean, we all might look white, but are you? We even do it with dumb stuff, man. You got no idea what it's like being a Reds fan in Cardinal country, guys. Man, I've gotten accosted at the grocery store. Why are you wearing that hat? Because I like it, lady. Settle down. Why are you wearing that hat? I mean, like, we do with stupid stuff. Like, I've talked to people, it's like, oh, you don't watch that show? No, I watch 15 others, guys. There's only so much room in my day to watch Netflix. I'll get to it. Maybe. Maybe not. Probably not. You're never going to get anything on their list. We do it with stupid stuff. Like, this is who we are as people. We're very, very tribalistic. So what I'm saying is this story between the Hellenistic Jews and the other Jews, the different languages that are spoken, and the apostles who are not Hellenists, the other people are saying, hey, we've got a problem, and they fix the problem. I'm only sort of kidding when I call it a miracle. That goes against everything that we do as people, as tribal creatures. It goes against everything that we are. Now, I don't want to make anybody feel bad. I'm not throwing stones at anybody. I'm the same way. Everybody's the same. This is who we are as people, and we come by it honestly. We come by it from going back all the way to the very beginning. The very first story we read in the Bible about life in this world as we know it. So post-Garden of Eden, very first story is about these two brothers, Cain and Abel. And long story short, you probably heard it anyway. If you hadn't, spoiler alert, Cain kills Abel. So, God tells Cain, because of what you've done, I am going to curse you to be a wanderer of the earth. You will be homeless, and you will travel, and you will never find a home that's just for you. That was the punishment for what he had done to Abel. And this is what we read in the book of Genesis. Cain's response to God, and it is very, very telling. It's in Genesis chapter 4. It is behind me, or should be. This is what it says. Cain replied to the Lord, my punishment is too great for me to bear. You have banished me from the land and from your presence. You have made me a homeless wanderer. Anyone who finds me will kill me. Now, for years, I will admit, like, so long of my life, I have totally made a terrible assumption about this story. And it's changed the way I look at it. Here was that dumb assumption. I made the assumption that the reason that Cain was going to be killed, the reason he's afraid, is because of retribution for what he did to Abel. Like, it's the whole eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth thing. Like, okay, he killed his brother. Other people, because he killed his brother, are going to want to kill him. That's the assumption I have made, like, from, like, day one of me even thinking about this story. Like, I don't know, the first time I read it, like, or my parents read it to me when I was 4 because Christianity is weird. But, like, you're very young, we tell this story, hey, the brothers kill each other. Don't do that. It's very odd. But anyway, I don't know, but for my entire cognizant life, I have very much made the assumption that this is retribution. Cain is afraid of retribution for what he's done. I've even heard preachers preach it. Well, Cain, he doesn't want to step up to the plate and man up and take responsibility for what he's done. If he gets killed, so be it. He killed somebody else. That's not in the story anywhere, by the way. And in fact, if you think about it, it can't be in the story. Like, nowhere do I read that God is going to give Cain a giant sign to wear around his neck saying, I killed my brother. No, who's going to know that Cain did this? It's not like this is on the news and everybody's watching the news and it's like, oh, here's this Cain guy. He's not like, a famous murderer that, that's now wandering around. Like, nobody knows who Cain is at all. No one's killing him because of retribution. And yet, as the story goes on, he's afraid somebody's going to kill him. And what's interesting is God believes him. God agrees with him. Because the next part of it, God says, okay, cool. I will give you this mark. I will mark you in such a way that people will know not to kill you. And we don't know what that means. We have no idea. But God says, I will make sure that you are not killed by all the people you'll encounter when you are wandering around. And that's because God believed Cain's complaint that, hey, everybody's going to kill me. God's basically, yeah, everybody is going to kill you. So I'm going to stop that. I'm going to nip that in the bud before it happens. So God agrees with Cain that it is dangerous. So the question is, why? Why would Cain be afraid? Why would people kill Cain? And the answer is very simple. He's not one of them. Everywhere Cain goes, he will be a foreigner. Everywhere Cain goes, he will be an immigrant. Everywhere Cain goes, he will be somebody that is talking in a funny accent, maybe a language that sounds dumb. His skin doesn't look the same. He doesn't know the local customs. Everywhere Cain goes, he is someone outside of the wall, outside of the tribe. And being outside of the tribe, outside of the wall, is a very dangerous place to be. In fact, according to Cain, as God agrees with Cain's thought process, it's a deadly place to be. From the start in this world, being outside of the tribe is a death sentence, while being inside of the tribe is protection. And I don't care what you call the tribe, a country or a religion or a race or whatever. That's the way it's always been. We come by it honestly. And the reason is because of sin. See, the Bible tells us that Cain's father is Adam. And the Bible tells us that Adam, as he was the first person, he stood in as representation for humanity. He represented us all. He, on our behalf, had an opportunity to do what God wanted or to not do what God wanted. And by not doing what God wanted, Adam cursed all of us. He built a world based on fear and death and rejection and rebellion and tribalism. Adam did this. Cain inherits it. This is the problem we've had ever since. Now, the question is, so what's to be done about that? And the Bible tells us something quite lovely. It's the gospel. It's the whole point we're sitting here talking. You should be way ahead of me here. You should be like, well, that's why Jesus came. You're right. That is why Jesus came. Here's what we read in Romans chapter 5 about this. When we were utterly helpless, Christ came at just the right time and died for us sinners. Now, most people would not be willing to die for an upright person, though someone might perhaps be willing to die for a person who is especially good. But God showed his great love for us by sending Christ to die for us while we were still sinners. That's the gospel. That is why we're Christians. That is that's it. Like that chunk of scripture, that's it. That's all we're ever really talking about. We're just like, that's the theme that we're hopefully doing variations on, and everything we say, do, preach, whatever, okay? We have a problem, we have a difficulty, and we are beset by sin and death and problems, and everything in the world is terrible, and that's a problem, and so Jesus came to fix it. He submitted to our wickedness. He died on our behalf. He died because of our sin. He died taking our sin onto himself, and he conquered death by dying. And he rose from the dead, and he gave us a new life, and that is what he did, and it is very nice, and it's very beautiful, and it has nothing to do with us being good, but because in fact, we just read right there that while it might be reasonable for somebody to die for somebody who's super awesome, that's not what God did. God became a man and died for really, really terrible people. While we were still sinners, while we were still tribalistic, God died for us. And that's swell. And that's great. And for us Christians, that's the heart of why we do what we do. And man, it'd be easy if the sermon was just over. And I said, yeah, the musician's going to come forward and we're done. Because here's what's amazing about this. We've done it for 2,000 years. You know how I said we can make a tribe out of anything? Baseball team and hobbies and Netflix and also things like race and country. Man, if we Christians, we've made a tribe out of Christianity. We've built up a wall. And history has told us. Look around in the world. Look at my life and your life. That's every bit as bad of a wall as any other walls. It's easier to build up a wall. It's easy to say, well, I'm in and they're out. But Jesus didn't do easy. Jesus did righteous. And so later in Romans chapter 5, we read this. Adam's sin led to condemnation. But God's free gift leads to our being made right with God, even though we are guilty of many sins. For the sin of this one man, Adam, caused death to rule over many, but even greater is God's wonderful grace and his gift of righteousness for all who receive it will live in triumph over sin and death through this one man, Jesus Christ. Yes, Adam's one sin brings condemnation for everyone. But Christ's one act of righteousness brings a right relationship with God and a new life for everyone. There's a great degree of irony that we came up with the doctrine of original sin surrounding these passages. To do so, you essentially have to ignore everything about Jesus in the passage. I mean, you can do it, whatever. It's possible. I can also make a cake filled with, chili in it. I mean, you want to eat it. It's a weird illustration. Maybe stick to the ones you got on the page, Drew. And it's also ironic that we focus so much on the verse that says, for all who receive it. That doesn't mean everybody will. Doesn't mean it's for everybody, right? The plainest language in this passage, the plainest illustration in this passage, we just talked about Adam stands in as a representation for us all, therefore creates a world and a humanity that is broken and sinful. In Adam, everybody is guilty. Everybody lives in this state of sin. We talked about it last week. We all live under the power of sin. But the good news of the gospel is that Jesus stood in for humanity just like Adam. And through his act of rebellion and sin, we are broken. Through Christ's one act, we have a new life. We have a right relationship with God. Not maybe, we do. Here's why this is important. If we are treating people like our tribe, and we're saying, well, if you're Christian, you're our tribe. And if you're not, you're not. The person who's going to argue with you right offhand is going to be Jesus. And he's going to say, what part of everyone didn't you hear? I didn't die for some. I didn't provide new life for some. My cross doesn't save some. There are no walls here. It's everyone. It's all. And this is mind-blowing to me, at least. Because we always want to talk about, well, Adam did things for everybody. Everybody's guilty because of Adam. Paul says Jesus is just like Adam, except better. And so if Adam can curse everybody, according to Paul, Jesus saves everybody. And functionally, what that means for us is very simple. It means that there are no walls. It means that there are no in and out. There is no us and them. There's just we. If you want to say we have a tribe, cool, there's one tribe. The human tribe. The human tribe broken by sin that Christ saved. That's it. That's our tribe. Every wall broken. Now, we've been talking the last few weeks about the book of Romans, talking about how all these things are difficult. We've got the Jews and the Gentiles, and they've got these problems and all this stuff, and we've talked about that, and if you've missed it, listen to some old sermons. But listen, this is incredibly important here because the Jews believed that they were righteous, and the Gentiles believed they were righteous, and the Jews believed the Gentiles were not righteous, and the Gentiles believed the Jews were not righteous, and so Paul comes along and says, listen, this gospel that you love, it not only is for everybody, but it is fully inclusive of all of you. The walls that divided the Jews and the Gentiles, and they were absolutely as big and difficult to climb as our walls in our world. Paul says those are gone. There's one tribe. Live like it. This morning, we're in our fourth week of our series called Equal in All Things. We talk about the book of Romans. We talk about this church at Romans. We talk about the equality of all people. As we talk about the gospel, we get to this place of this beautiful passage that we don't like the implications of. I can't tell you how many sermons I have read, people working themselves into pretzels to get the passage to not say what it says. And look, by the way, as an aside, I don't know what all of it means. You're probably thinking, yeah, but what about this? Me too, I get it. But you know what Paul said? The stuff we read. He said what he said. And the meaning is so massive in how we treat other people in this world. So our fourth lesson from the book of Romans is this: Christ's death saves everyone. Because of that, there are no tribes. We are all one people. Christ's death saves everyone. Because of that, there are no tribes, and we are all one people. This is why I wish that we would have stopped the sermon 5 minutes ago. It's way harder to live like everybody's in than it is to live like the people we like are in and the people we don't like are out. I mean, I'll be honest. I think this passage is amazing. Romans 5, the whole chapter, one of my favorite books, one of my favorite chapters in the whole Bible. I wish I could tattoo the whole thing on my forehead. It would look weird and awkward, so I'm not going to do it. But beautiful passage. But man, does it seem impractical. Because right now, if you are tracking with me, you're thinking of like 30 groups and maybe like 200 people that you're like, yeah, not them. For real? No, not them. The idea that Jesus loves the people you don't like as much as he loves you. The idea that Jesus died for the people you don't like as much as he died for you is humbling and is the sort of thing you don't really want to talk about. Because we're tribalistic. Come by it honestly, but that's who we are. So the question is, what do we do with this? Well, the answer, I think, is pretty simple. We need to treat the people that are outside of our circle, outside of our tribe, whatever that tribe might be, exactly as we would treat the people inside of our tribe. Same standard, same kindness, same love, same everything. It may not be perfect because you may not be treating the people inside your tribe all that well. But if we can get just the equality there, we've got some massive steps in the right direction. The truth is we're called to live by the simplest rule. You learned it in kindergarten, but I'm glad we learned it in kindergarten. This is what Jesus taught. We treat people the way we'd like to be treated. And if we can do that for the people outside of our circle as well as the people inside of our circle, then we are beginning to live the gospel, and we're beginning to live the world that Christ envisioned and died for. Jesus did not die for some. Jesus did not die for the church, guys. Jesus died for all of us, and the church and the some are included. But Christ's vision of the world is far more inclusive than anyone else's ever has been. A world in which everyone is included in one tribe and one people, has a right relationship with God, has new life, is treated like a brother and a sister. It's hard, and it seems impractical, but you know what? Practical got the world we can see. People have been living practically, and you can see what's happened. So maybe we try impractical for a little bit, and maybe we see what can change. And while we do it, let's trust in Jesus. This morning, musicians are going to come forward. They're going to sing a song. We offer an invitation each and every week to trust in who Christ is, to take him up on his offer of his death for all people, to embrace the truth he already believes about us. The Bible teaches that we do that in faith by repenting and being baptized. It sounds like one thing, or it sounds like two things. It's just one. And we say we want things God's way. We get it on the water. It's like our old selves being put to death. Get it out of the water. It's our new selves being born again. Maybe we made that decision. Nice warm baptistry. We can do it literally anytime. If you're an immersed believer in Christ, you're looking for a perfect church home, this is not it. But we do want to live a life that might be miraculous, where we love our neighbors no matter who they are, not because they are inside our walls, but because they exist in or out at all. As we stand and as we sing.